I think everybody there was moved to tears, and I thought as I came out, I thought,
Camilla has just sparked public fury after quietly making a decision that shocked the palace. A special tradition meant to honor Princess Charlotte and keep Princess Diana's memory alive was suddenly cancelled. But the cancellation wasn't the only shock. Her calm response when confronted left people speechless. Behind the polite words, tension was rising and whispers began spreading through the palace. What really made Camilla cancel something so meaningful? And how will Charlotte and her family respond to this quiet but bold move? Living forever in Diana's shadow. Camilla had lived most of her public life beneath a shadow she could never fully step out of. No matter how many years passed, Diana remained fixed in the hearts of the people. She was remembered not only as a royal figure, but as someone who felt close, gentle, and human. Her face still appeared in memories that refused to fade. People spoke of her kindness as if it had happened yesterday. Flowers still appeared in places tied to her name. The world did not move on in the way Camilla expected. Diana became more than a person. She became a symbol of warmth and loss. Camilla watched this devotion grow stronger with time, not weaker. Every reminder made it clear that Diana's place had been sealed forever. Camilla understood that she was not fighting a living woman, but an ideal that could never disappoint. Camilla's own story followed a different path, one marked by discomfort and judgment. Her name remained linked to pain, whispers, and unresolved anger. Many people saw her as the reason a family had broken apart. They did not see complexity or years of quiet suffering. They saw blame. Palace silence tried to soften the noise, but it failed. Each appearance Camilla made brought new comparisons. The public looked for warmth in her eyes and measured it against memories of Diana's gentle nature. No effort seemed enough. Kind gestures were dismissed. Calm words were questioned. Camilla carried herself carefully, yet every step felt watched. She learned that forgiveness does not come easily when a story has already been written in people's minds. Her role was fixed, and no crown could rewrite it. The day Diana passed away changed everything and nothing at the same time. The world slowed down as grief spread across countries and generations. The monarchy stood still, unsure how to breathe again. Camilla felt the weight of that loss deeply, even if her grief was never openly welcomed. Still, she believed this moment might close a chapter that had haunted her for years. She thought time would finally soften sharp edges. She believed silence would give space for healing. As the years moved forward, Camilla hoped steady service would speak louder than the past. She imagined respect growing quietly, built through patience and duty. In private moments, she allowed herself to believe that the future might be kinder. It felt possible that the story could finally change direction. Yet the past did not loosen its grip. Diana's presence seemed to grow stronger as years passed. Stories about her were retold with even more emotion. New generations learned her name before learning history. Her image remained gentle, untouched by mistakes or time. Camilla began to understand that memory has a strange power. It can smooth flaws and sharpen love. No amount of time could weaken the bond people felt. The space Camilla expected to step into was never empty. It was guarded by emotion and loyalty. She realized that patience alone could not overcome a legend. Diana had become larger than life, and Camilla was left standing beside a shadow that refused to shrink. As Camilla continued her duties, she sensed a shift forming quietly around her. The palace moved forward, but the public gaze looked elsewhere. A new presence began to draw attention, not through effort, but through natural grace. Camilla noticed how easily affection returned to familiar patterns. It unsettled her. She had waited so long for calm, only to feel it slipping away again. The feeling was not loud or sudden. It was slow, creeping, and impossible to ignore. The past was not buried beneath time. It had simply taken a new form. Camilla felt history circling back, reminding her that some stories repeat themselves when lessons remain unfinished. By the time Camilla understood what was happening, it was already too late to stop it. Another figure was stepping into the light, gentle yet powerful, carrying echoes of what had come before. Camilla's competition. Diana was gone, and Camilla believed the storm had finally passed. She expected the palace to grow quieter, the public to slowly let go, and life to settle into a calmer rhythm. For a short time it seemed possible. The crowd softened, the noise lowered, and the years moved forward. Camilla stepped into her role with care, hoping steady presence would bring acceptance. Then Catherine arrived, and the calm Camilla expected never came. Kate entered the royal world with ease, not forcing attention, not chasing approval. She moved gently, spoke softly, and listened closely. People noticed how natural she seemed, how comfortable she was among them. Old feelings stirred in the public heart, even if no one said it aloud. The air shifted again, and Camilla felt it before anyone explained it. Kate felt new, yet strangely familiar. Her smile carried warmth without effort. Her patience felt genuine, not practiced. She treated people with simple respect, whether they wore fine clothes or stood behind ropes. Slowly, quietly, the public began to compare once more. No one needed to announce it. The similarities spoke for themselves. Kate reminded many of Diana's kindness, her calm strength, and her ability to make people feel important. These thoughts spread gently like a shared secret. Camilla watched this from a careful distance. She saw how affection grew without being demanded. Kate never tried to take space. She never reached for the spotlight. Yet it followed her anyway. That was what made it harder to accept. History seemed to be finding its way back without effort. As time passed, crowds gathered for Kate with the same joy they once held for Diana. Cheers grew louder, smiles grew wider. The warmth Camilla had waited years for flowed freely towards someone else. It felt like watching the same story unfold with different details. Camilla stood present but unseen, close but distant. The pain was sharper because Kate did nothing to earn blame. There was no rivalry, no harsh words, no struggle for position. Kate simply existed, and people loved her for it. Camilla felt herself pushed aside once more, not by force, but by feeling. It was harder to fight something so gentle. Resentment had nowhere to land, yet it still burned quietly within her. Kate's popularity deepened when she became a mother. The image of family grew stronger, softer, and more complete. People saw stability, care, and warmth in the growing household. Kate carried her role with calm confidence, balancing duty and tenderness with ease. Each child strengthened the bond between her and the public. Camilla remained queen in title, performing her duties with discipline and grace. Yet affection did not follow position. Love does not obey rules or rank. The hearts of the people leaned toward the younger family, toward the future they represented. Camilla felt the distance widen. She had reached the highest place possible, yet stood far from the center of emotion. Then Charlotte was born, and something changed completely. Camilla did not understand it at first. She saw another child, another future royal, another name added to the line. What she did not see was the storm gathering quietly beyond palace walls. The arrival of Charlotte touched something deep and old in the public mind. Camilla sensed a shift she could not explain, a feeling that this moment carried more meaning than the others. She believed she had already endured the worst of comparison and memory. She did not know that this birth would awaken feelings even stronger than before. The rise of Princess Charlotte. Princess Charlotte entered public life with a calm strength that surprised many people. From her earliest moments in view, she showed confidence that did not seem forced or trained. She stood tall during formal events and followed protocol with ease. Her waves were gentle and controlled, never careless. She listened closely to instructions and appeared aware of her surroundings. Cameras followed her movements because she held attention without trying. People noticed how she stayed composed even during long events. She did not fidget or seek comfort in panic. Instead, she carried herself with balance and quiet focus. Many felt they were watching someone far older than her age. Charlotte seemed to understand when to be still and when to respond. This sense of control made her stand out among children of her generation. It was not learned quickly. It felt natural, calm, and deeply rooted. As time passed, the public began to observe her more closely. What started as simple interest slowly turned into deep fascination. People spoke about her posture, her facial expressions, and her calm reactions. They noticed how she remained steady while standing before large crowds. Social spaces filled with careful thoughts that slowly became shared beliefs. Many felt a strong emotional connection without knowing why. They saw something familiar in her presence. The memory of kindness, warmth, and gentle authority returned through her actions. These ideas moved quietly at first, then spread widely. The belief grew that a spirit from the past had found a new form. Charlotte became linked to memory and emotion. Each appearance strengthened that connection. The public did not need to be convinced. They felt it instinctively. Her presence brought comfort and familiarity that reached beyond her years. Charlotte's charm flowed naturally through her relationships with her brothers. She guided George with calm firmness, helping him stay focused without embarrassment. Her manner was respectful but clear, showing leadership without harshness. With Louis, she showed patience and playfulness, allowing him to be joyful while keeping order. She balanced responsibility and childhood with ease. Many admired how she moved between roles without confusion. She did not act superior, nor did she fade into the background. She simply existed in balance. Observers found this rare and reassuring. Her behavior suggested emotional understanding far beyond her age. People saw leadership, kindness, and maturity in small actions. These moments stayed with them longer than grand gestures. Charlotte became a symbol of quiet strength. The public felt drawn to her because she represented stability in a changing world. With every appearance, admiration deepened and expectations quietly formed. People began to project hopes onto Charlotte without realizing it. She became a bridge between memory and future, linking what was lost to what could grow. Her image softened public moments and brought calm energy wherever she stood. Charlotte did not need words to speak. Her silence carried meaning. She reminded people of grace without effort. The comparisons to the past grew stronger, not out of intention, but out of emotion. This connection did not fade with time. It became part of how the public saw her. Charlotte remained unaware of the weight placed upon her. She continued to behave with the same calm focus. Yet the role she played in public hearts expanded quietly. What began as admiration slowly turned into expectation, and expectation carries power that few can control. Camilla felt this change deeply, even when no one spoke of it aloud. Once again, Diana's presence rose above her own, carried through the image of a child. The comparisons reopened wounds Camilla believed had healed. She watched attention gather around Charlotte with warmth and devotion. The feeling was painfully familiar. It reminded her that affection cannot be demanded or redirected. Camilla performed her duties faithfully, yet felt unseen. The rise of Charlotte brought back memories Camilla wanted buried. The shadow she had lived with returned stronger than before. This time it felt heavier because it passed through innocence. Charlotte had done nothing wrong, yet her presence stirred old pain. Camilla struggled with emotions she could not share. Resentment grew quietly, hidden beneath duty and silence. Inside the palace, admiration began to change into tension. What the public celebrated created unease behind closed doors. Charlotte's growing influence shifted balance without effort. Camilla sensed the change and feared its direction. She realized this was not a passing phase. Charlotte was becoming a lasting presence that shaped perception. Envy behind closed doors. Camilla had spent years learning to live in the shadows, but the rise of Princess Charlotte changed everything. At first, she told herself it was harmless, that admiration for a child was natural. She could watch from a distance, perform her duties, and let the world have its favorites. Yet as Charlotte grew, as people followed her every move, Camilla began to feel the weight of comparison in a way she had not expected. The attention given to Charlotte was no longer about a memory or nostalgia. It was about the present, the living, breathing image of a child who commanded public love effortlessly. Camilla noticed how adults smiled at Charlotte, how cameras lingered on her gestures, and how whispers of admiration followed her wherever she went. It was quiet, subtle, but it was everywhere. The shadow Camilla had once endured alone now seemed to move and grow, taking on a new form, and it cut closer than ever. The discomfort quickly turned personal. Camilla's own granddaughter began to suffer under the unspoken weight of public comparison. Once proud moments for her family now felt overshadowed by Charlotte's presence. Every smile of her granddaughter seemed smaller in contrast, every action less noticed, every milestone quietly measured against another child. Conversations among staff, Subtle remarks in the press and social media chatter created invisible walls of judgment. Camilla watched as praise for Charlotte became a mirror reflecting her granddaughter's every imperfection. It was unfair, but the world rarely considered fairness when admiration and expectation collided. Camilla's eyes sharpened with concern, and her heart grew heavy with frustration. What once might have been a fleeting discomfort was now a threat to those she loved most. As days passed, comparisons became more pointed. People began to speak of Charlotte as if she were a standard of excellence. Observers judged other children against her composure, her charm, and her effortless poise. Even those close to her family began to make quiet remarks, drawing attention to small mistakes or missed gestures. Camilla saw her granddaughter's confidence falter under the weight of these observations. She noticed how small criticisms lingered, how innocent actions were twisted into commentary, and how a world that celebrated youth could also cut cruelly. The sharpness of envy began to touch her deeply, and it awakened feelings she had long suppressed. It was no longer merely the attention toward Charlotte that troubled her. It was the damage it caused to her own family's image, the subtle erosion of admiration she felt should have been theirs. Camilla felt increasingly cornered. The world had always judged her, but now it judged her family. The presence of a child who carried both public love and echoes of the past made her feel powerless. She had endured whispers, comparisons, and glances, but this crossed a line she could not ignore. The admiration Charlotte drew seemed to overshadow everything Camilla tried to protect. The feeling of being pushed aside returned, stronger than before. Jealousy, once quiet and contained, began to simmer openly in her thoughts. It was no longer just personal frustration, it was a perception of threat. Charlotte's growing image became a symbol of everything Camilla feared she might lose, a reminder that love and attention are finite, and in the eyes of the public, someone had to come first. Over time, what began as jealousy transformed into strategy. Camilla's mind worked carefully, quietly, and deliberately. She began to observe the rhythms of the palace, the habits of those who protected Charlotte, and the ways influence moved behind closed doors. She watched how small gestures could tilt attention, how events could highlight one child while minimizing another. Camilla understood that admiration could be guided, shaped, and even redirected. She saw opportunity in subtle action. Her thoughts no longer lingered on simple feelings of envy. They turned to planning. Each choice, each decision became a careful calculation. She considered timing, optics, and the smallest consequences. It was not forceful or public. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it carried weight. The sense of power returned to her, but it was tied now to a single goal: to protect her own family's standing and to curb the influence of a child she could not fully stop. Gradually, Camilla began to view Charlotte differently. The child who had once been a symbol of innocence and admiration transformed in Camilla's eyes. She was no longer just a bright young princess, celebrated and adored. She became a challenge, a rival in the unspoken struggle for attention and influence. Charlotte's charm and poise were no longer qualities to admire. They were obstacles that needed consideration. Each public appearance, each act of composure, each moment of praise Charlotte received reminded Camilla of what she feared she was losing. The feelings were not simple. They were layered with fear, protection, and a desire to control. Where once there was quiet jealousy, now there was calculation. Camilla had decided that she could not allow a child to overshadow her family any longer, and she prepared herself to act. It was at this point that a quiet decision formed. Camilla understood that the smallest move could shift perception, and she considered what could subtly redirect attention. One action, done with care and discretion, might create space for her own family to regain prominence. It would not need to be dramatic or forceful, only effective. In the quiet halls of the palace, she began to weigh possibilities, measure outcomes, and imagine the consequences. The plan was simple in thought but profound in effect. A single cancellation, a minor adjustment, could ripple outward, altering the course of admiration and influence. It would be enough to challenge Charlotte's growing hold on public hearts. In Camilla's mind, this was not cruelty. It was strategy, protection, and survival. She understood the delicacy of such a move and the power it could wield. The palace itself seemed unaware of the storm forming in the quiet corners. Staff moved through corridors, children played without notice, and life continued under a veil of ordinary routine. Yet behind closed doors, emotions were shifting. Camilla's thoughts grew sharper, more deliberate. Every smile, every gesture, every word of influence was now measured against her plan. She knew that a single, calculated choice could set events in motion that could not be stopped. The potential consequences weighed heavily, yet the certainty of impact drew her forward. The quiet cancellation she considered would not only shift attention but also awaken feelings long buried in the palace. Respect, admiration, loyalty, and frustration would collide in ways that could not be predicted, and Camilla was prepared to watch them unfold. What had started as simple envy had transformed into action, calculated and precise. Camilla understood that power in the palace was subtle, rooted in perception and influence. She saw how admiration could shift quietly and unexpectedly, and she positioned herself to guide that change. The child she had once tolerated with patience now represented the center of her plan. Charlotte's charm, her maturity, her public appeal, all became elements in a game Camilla intended to shape. The quiet decision she made would soon set in motion consequences that reached far beyond what anyone anticipated. It was the calm before a storm that only she could see, the moment before a single act would trigger a royal explosion, altering relationships, perceptions, and influence in a world where every small move carried immense weight. The tradition that was quietly canceled. Princess Charlotte had been preparing for the tradition for weeks. It was a quiet, gentle ceremony meant to honor Diana, a way to keep her memory alive through the younger generation. The event was small but deeply meaningful, a bridge between past and present, showing respect and love for someone who had shaped the family and the world. For Charlotte, it was more than a duty. It was a personal connection to her grandmother's legacy, something that gave her a sense of closeness to the woman who had captured the hearts of millions. She had practiced her steps, her gestures, and her words with care, knowing the eyes of many would watch. The tradition promised a moment of reflection and tenderness, a way to acknowledge history in a way only children could make feel alive and pure. The tradition's symbolism was not lost on the adults around her. It represented more than just memory. It was a teaching of values, of connection, of understanding the weight of family history. Charlotte's presence, her composure, and her gentle grace made the ceremony even more meaningful. The adults saw it as a continuation of something precious, a legacy carried forward by someone who could embody dignity without effort. Her actions reflected awareness and sensitivity beyond her years, something that naturally drew admiration. In private, those who watched could not help but feel a quiet pride. Charlotte had inherited more than just a name. She had inherited presence, and with it the ability to remind everyone of the woman they had once loved. It was a delicate, quiet power, one that existed without ceremony or display. Camilla noticed the preparations and felt a chill she did not expect. She watched from a distance as Charlotte practiced, as George and Louis moved in support, and as others discussed the significance of the event. Slowly, the feeling in Camilla's chest hardened. She understood that this small ceremony could bring public attention back to Diana's memory in a way that reminded everyone once again of a presence she could not replace. The admiration that had quietly been growing around Charlotte and her siblings was about to take shape in a tangible act. It was subtle, gentle, and respectful, but it carried a weight Camilla could not ignore. For the first time, the envy she had held in shadow became urgent, a pressure that demanded action. She believed that such attention could overshadow her family in ways she could not allow. Her feelings were careful and measured, but they were fierce. Then quietly, a decision was made. The tradition would be canceled. Camilla presented her reasoning in the form of official words meant to sound impartial and commanding. She explained that there were more important duties than children honoring the dead. The words were clear, formal, and designed to discourage questions. On the surface, the explanation seemed simple and practical. It appeared to prioritize responsibility and focus over sentiment. Behind the words, however, lay calculation. Camilla understood that by removing this symbolic act, she could shift attention and redirect admiration toward her own family. The act was not aggressive in tone, but it carried force. It was subtle in execution, yet its consequences would be deeply felt. In the quiet corridors of the palace, a single decision had set a chain in motion that no one could easily stop. The palace attempted to maintain secrecy. Staff members were instructed to keep the cancellation as private as possible, avoiding the public eye and limiting discussion. Yet children are acutely aware of the world around them. Charlotte noticed the shift immediately. Something she had anticipated, practiced, and cherished was suddenly gone. She felt the absence like a shadow pressing on her chest. Her composure wavered slightly, and she understood, even without words, that the removal of the tradition was intentional. George, her elder brother, felt a rising anger. He understood the principle behind the act, the message that something meaningful had been taken away without cause. Louis, younger and more impressionable, felt confusion and upset. He sensed the disappointment of those around him and struggled to understand why fairness had been denied. Together, the three children experienced a quiet but powerful mix of emotions that no one had expected to manifest so strongly. Their awareness of loss was immediate, profound, and undeniable. The cancellation of the tradition sent ripples through the family, touching hearts and stirring thoughts. Charlotte felt a sense of frustration that came not from arrogance but from principle. George's anger grew steadily, quiet but firm as he realized the decision was unfair and unnecessary. Louis's confusion became a mirror of the tension around him, reflecting the sense that something important had been taken away. The children, though young, had deep instincts about right and wrong, about fairness, and about respect for memory. Their reaction was not loud or rebellious, but it carried weight in a way adults might underestimate. The quiet force of their feelings pressed against palace walls, unseen but insistent. The children knew what Diana represented, and they understood that this act, though small, was meant to diminish her presence in the family story. Despite the palace's careful efforts, the decision could not remain unnoticed. The removal of the tradition reached the children's attention with full clarity. They felt disappointment, frustration, and a growing determination to act. Their shared awareness of the injustice created a quiet alliance among them. They were small, but the intensity of their feelings gave them a strength adults could not easily dismiss. In their minds, the tradition represented more than ceremony. It represented fairness, respect, and acknowledgement of someone they loved. Its removal was an affront, a deliberate act that spoke to power and influence rather than reason. They could feel the weight of history being manipulated, and they were determined to respond. The tension built quietly but relentlessly. The children, each in their own way, began to consider how they might restore what had been taken from them. They understood instinctively that the one man who had always listened, who had always understood their hearts and intentions, could restore balance. The weight of disappointment, frustration, and quiet anger pushed them toward action. They did not speak openly to others, but they knew their voices mattered. Three young voices were about to reach the one man who never ignored them: Charles's reaction to the truth. The children moved quietly through the palace halls, their steps careful but purposeful. Charlotte led the way, her face composed but serious, carrying the weight of disappointment that had been growing for days. George walked close beside her, his small hands clenched with quiet determination, a fire of justice burning in his chest. Louis trailed slightly behind, confusion and upset written plainly across his young face. They did not speak of their plan with anyone else, but together they understood the urgency of what they needed to do. They had witnessed the removal of something meaningful, a small act of tradition that carried the weight of memory and respect, and they could not ignore it. They knew that silence would allow injustice to stand. When they reached Charles, they found him in the private sitting room, alone and attentive. He looked at them with gentle eyes, immediately sensing the seriousness of their visit. The children spoke with a mixture of clarity and innocence, explaining in the simplest words what had happened and what had been taken from them. Charles listened carefully, absorbing each detail, understanding not just the act itself, but the implications behind it. He felt a familiar twinge of grief rise inside him, a memory of Diana, her presence, and the pain that had never fully left him. Hearing the story through the children's eyes reopened old wounds, stirring emotions he had carefully guarded for years. The sense of loss, injustice, and family history collided all at once. The quiet tension escalated into confrontation almost immediately. Camilla entered the room, her posture firm, her expression guarded. She presented her reasoning, her words careful and official, meant to justify the cancellation. Charles did not respond with anger at first. Instead, he regarded her with a mixture of concern and disbelief, probing her motives with a directness that left little room for evasion. He questioned her understanding of the impact, her sense of timing, and her awareness of what the tradition meant to the family and to Diana's memory. Camilla tried to defend her position, to explain her reasoning and emphasize the importance of other duties, but Charles's focus remained unshaken. His eyes were steady, his attention sharp, and he refused to let her words obscure the truth of the children's hurt. The confrontation deepened when William stepped in, his presence firm and unwavering. He moved close to protect his children, to guard their rights, and to ensure their voices were heard. His anger was controlled, directed at the injustice of the situation rather than the individual, but it carried weight that could not be ignored. He spoke with authority, highlighting fairness and respect, reminding those present that admiration and tradition are not trivial matters. Kate followed him, her calm presence balancing the rising tension. She did not raise her voice or demand attention, but her unshakable demeanor made clear that the children's position was supported fully. Together, the parents formed a barrier against indifference, their unity highlighting the seriousness of the moment. As the discussion continued, the past slowly resurfaced, pulled into the light by the intensity of the present conflict. Diana's pain, the years of heartbreak, and the affair that had left deep marks on the family history became part of the conversation, no longer hidden behind polite avoidance. Memories of silence, of unspoken resentment, and of old wounds that had never healed spilled into the room. Each detail reminded everyone of the long shadow that had fallen over the monarchy and over the individuals within it. Camilla could feel the weight pressing against her carefully constructed explanations. The room was no longer about titles or appearances. It had become a space where truth, history, and emotion collided. The past demanded recognition, and those who had tried to ignore it could no longer avoid its force. The argument was no longer about a simple tradition or the removal of a small ceremony. It had grown into a battle over power, over memory, and over respect. Every gesture, every word, every glance carried meaning far beyond the immediate moment. The children, though young, had sparked a revelation that affected everyone in the room. The adults could not dismiss their feelings, and the weight of history could not be ignored. Each person present understood that what had been taken away was symbolic of more than memory. It was a reflection of values, of loyalty, and of the right to honor those who came before. The clash in the room was intense, measured, and dramatic, but it was not without purpose. Camilla felt the shift sharply. The careful defenses she had constructed now seemed fragile against the combined weight of truth, history, and familial unity. She realized that influence and titles could not erase the reality of the past. She had tried to control perception, to assert authority, but the room reminded her that admiration and respect are earned, not demanded. The confrontation revealed the deeper layers of emotion, of loyalty, and of legacy that she had underestimated. It became clear that the children's voices, guided and supported by those who loved them, carried far more force than she had anticipated. Her place, long assumed, was no longer unchallenged. By the end of the confrontation, the room was still with tension, but clarity had emerged. Charles's attention remained focused on the children, acknowledging their right to honor what had been taken from them. William and Kate stood firm, ensuring that justice and fairness prevailed in the moment. Camilla was left to reckon with the limits of influence, the inevitability of memory, and the truth that respect cannot be manufactured or stolen. The small ceremony may have been canceled, but the voices of those who valued it had created a force impossible to ignore. The power of history, of love, and of rightful admiration had been restored, at least in principle, leaving everyone aware that titles do not erase memory, and authority cannot silence truth. In that room, lessons were learned, and boundaries were redrawn. The past had been brought to light in ways that demanded acknowledgement. The children had achieved what seemed impossible for their age. They reminded the adults that the legacy of Diana was alive, that her memory mattered, and that acts of respect carried weight. The palace walls, usually so controlled, could not contain the force of truth, and the adults were forced to confront emotions that had been buried for decades. Amidst all of this, someone was about to be reminded that titles do not erase history. Camilla is finally put in her place. The room felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves held the weight of every memory, every unspoken grievance, and every quiet longing that had built over decades. Camilla stood with measured composure, yet the tension pressed against her like a storm waiting to break. William drew near, his posture firm, his gaze steady, leaving no room for doubt. He made it clear without harsh words that boundaries existed, lines that could not be crossed. The unity between him and his children was undeniable, a force Camilla could neither sway nor ignore. Kate stood beside her children, calm but resolute, an unwavering presence that reinforced the message. Together, family and love created a barrier no manipulation could penetrate. Charles's presence added weight to the room, a quiet authority that carried both wisdom and judgment. He made it known where he stood, with clarity and intention. The tradition may have been canceled, but the meaning behind it remained untouched. Respect, memory, and honor were not gestures that could be erased by decree. Charles's support reinforced what the children had already shown. Their voices mattered, and their rights to celebrate the past were acknowledged. Camilla felt the combined weight of these forces pressing against the walls of her carefully built defenses. Her influence, long assumed to be secure, faltered against the quiet certainty of family loyalty and public admiration. Camilla's realization was slow but sharp. She understood with a sinking certainty that no matter how high her title, no matter how carefully she maneuvered, there were truths she could not rewrite. Diana's memory remained untouchable, carried by those who loved her and by the children who reflected her spirit. Charlotte's presence was more than symbolic. It was living, vibrant, and undeniable. The young princess moved through life with a grace that could not be commanded or taken away. Her place was secured, not through strategy, manipulation, or authority, but through love, admiration, and innate dignity. Camilla's schemes, long held and carefully measured, were powerless in the face of that natural force. The shift in balance was undeniable. Camilla felt it in every glance, every gesture, every quiet word exchanged between family members. The power she had once believed was hers to guide had dissipated, replaced by something that could not be dictated. William's line was firm and protective. Kate's presence was steadfast and unwavering. Charles's support lent authority and clarity. Charlotte, though young, embodied the essence of what no one could remove: innate charm, respect, and love from those around her. Camilla had attempted to control perception, to influence admiration, to secure a place in history that was never hers to claim. The truth became clear. Some forces cannot be bent, only witnessed. Camilla's sense of loss was sharp and immediate. The shadow she had tried so long to escape had returned, not through comparison alone, but through the affirmation of family and the natural affection of those who mattered most. She had sought prominence, recognition, and influence, but the world had decided otherwise. The attention she coveted flowed toward the young, toward those who carried both legacy and promise. Charlotte, in her innocence and composure, had claimed the space that admiration could not ignore. Camilla stood as a witness, realizing that power is fleeting when it contradicts love and legacy. For the first time in decades, Camilla faced the full reality of her position. She could wear the crown, attend the ceremonies, and perform every duty assigned to her. She could move through public appearances with all the decorum required by her role. Yet these external symbols could not erase history, alter perception, or change what hearts truly held dear. Diana's memory remained alive, not in statements or decrees, but in the lives of those who carried it forward. Charlotte's presence, calm and assured, reflected that love and respect cannot be manufactured or stolen. Camilla could act, speak, and decide, but she could not change the currents of genuine admiration and affection.